We are starting the 1910s. The only build-up dates of 1910s are that we get access to painted walls and drywall. I updated a couple rooms to show that, but mostly everything stayed the same. The biggest change in this decade is the war. Even though the war doesn't start to mid to late S, we are getting started right away because it's The Sims and time moves too quick. To determine who gets drafted, I will spin the wheel daily until we no longer have any men of age to be drafted. First up is Charles. He said goodbye to his wife and children, and then was sent off. In the most devastating turn of events, just shortly after Charles left, Alice was diagnosed with a fatal illness. She will receive surgery, but with only a 20% chance of success. Alice's surgery was a success. She beat all odds and managed to beat the illness. Her twin sister Ethel came over after hearing the good news, and the two spent some much-needed time bonding and catching up with each other. Alice told her about how all the children were doing, and Ethel told her about her travels and the protests she's been attending. Ethel met Louis as well, but the two did not seem to like each other. She found him pretentious, and he found her annoying. Although Louis could not deny that she was extremely beautiful, Alice introduced her sister to the other women of her club, and Ethel encouraged them to join the protests with her. Alice desperately wanted to, but with two children in school, and for under the age of 5 it didn't seem possible. Marcy and Etheline aged up. We now have 4 toddlers. There are a lot of characters in our household now, and a lot of storylines I want to explore. So the next couple of parts will be focused on the children, and of course I will give war updates as they occur. Lillian and Josiah desperately needed out of the house, wanting a break from all of the crying toddlers and stressed adults. Josiah had met a boy in school, and the two had become fast friends. His name was Edward, and he was top in the class and a genius. Josiah had even started to work harder in school, just to impress him. They were very young, but Edward was his first crush. Josiah helped bring out the rambunctious side of Edward. The two brought out the best in each other. They created wild stories that most people wouldn't understand, but that's the way they liked it. The household held a birthday party to celebrate Lillian's birthday. She had a lot of kids over, as she was a very popular sim in school. Her traits were randomized, and it seems she's a lot more similar to her mother than I realized. To no one's surprise, she's very beautiful. Henry got the chance to see Dorothy again. They hadn't seen each other since he met her at the park. She revealed to him that she had lost her parents, and she was the sole provider for her two younger siblings. Henry wished he had more time with her, but he had been drafted. He made a promise to her that if she waited for him, as soon as he came home he would marry her and take care of her and her siblings. Even though there was significant work to be done at the house, Alice did not want to deny Lillian the chance at an education. Lillian went down to the library to get time alone to study. Even there, she seemed to be surrounded by children. While looking for a quiet spot, she ran into yet another familiar face. Her mother. Lillian felt her heart break, seeing her mother just living her life while the rest of her family seemed to struggle daily. Jacqueline tried to be civil, but Lillian didn't even give her a chance to manipulate her. She had to speak her mind. After a heated argument, Lillian left the library quickly. She found herself a very handsome distraction, and the two talked and flirted into the evening. She returned home after dark and walked in on a romantic exchange between Louis and Ethel, Alice's married twin sister. Lillian was shocked and angry. She felt like she couldn't trust either of her parents. Not knowing they had been spotted, the pair continued their rendezvous into the night. They had convinced everyone they hated each other, but in the end lust had taken over. Harrison aged up into a child and gained the mean trait. Now that all of the men were off at war, Alice was the sole provider for the household. She would now have to keep up the farm. Lillian tried to help with cooking, but she really only knows how to make salad. Ethel has moved in to help with chores and childcare. Ethel had been in an unhappy marriage long before she started her affair with Louis. They argued often, and there were a few times where it got physical. They lived on his parents' estate, and she was constantly scrutinized by her mother-in-law for not having been able to have a child yet. She felt like a stranger in her own home, so she used her protest work and traveling as an escape. One person who was not happy about Ethel staying with them was Lillian. She disobeyed Alice's rules and went out after school on a date to avoid her. Lillian didn't know much about the boy, and she wasn't particularly keen on him. He was smitten by her though, and she loved the attention. Once again, she stayed out late and missed her curfew. Ethel had waited up for her and lectured her on following the house rules. Lillian was very dismissive and basically told her that just because she was sleeping with her father, it didn't make her her mother. The Dabney residence was shattered after they received the news that Charles Dabney had died in war. There was no body to bury, but they still chose to honor him with a gravestone in the family graveyard. Josiah was at a loss for words. Seeing his mother's sorrow made his heart crumble. He wanted desperately to take away her sadness. Harrison had few memories of his father, but his mother had always told him stories daily of how amazing he was. Alice had lost more than just a husband, but her soulmate. He completed her, and with his death she felt half of her fade away with him. In the headstone they carved in memory of a hard-working and loyal husband, father, son, and brother. Forever in our hearts. Alice had experienced loss before, but the loss of Charles was very difficult for her. They received his urn, and she set it up in their bedroom. She spoke to him throughout the day, trying to heal herself. Alice was not a selfish woman. Even in her grief she knew she was needed in other places. Her children felt her sadness, and they needed her. The love and fulfillment she got by just being around them was enough. She loved each of them, even the children who weren't her blood. She knew she would find happiness once more by watching them grow. Ethel was not a housemaker and struggled to keep up with all of the chores. However, she had never felt so much love. Isaiah aged up. He's a perfect mix of his parents, in my opinion. Lillian also did her part of helping out on the farm and got a boy from school to help with the garden. He even offered to work for free in exchange for a date. Josiah talked through his grief with the person he trusted most, Edward. Edward was great at helping him through it. They were best friends after all. They knew each other very well. After receiving word that Ethel's husband had returned home safely from war, Eleanor and Lillian prepared a lovely meal to see her off. During their breakfast, there was a knock. Louis returned home from war, and he came with awful news. Henry had died. He had been fighting for his life after injury, but didn't make it through. Louis was devastated, witnessing the death of his younger brother and oldest son had left him empty. He was haunted by the memory of them and stuck wondering why it wasn't him. The rules of the challenge state that men returning from war must gain another negative trait to show the trauma. Louis has gained the main trait. I chose to replace the self-assured trait because of the way he questioned why he had lived in the first place. Since his return, Louis had been fighting back the tortuous thoughts of war through the numbing feeling of alcohol. He loved drinking, and the company of the women at the local bar was an added plus to keep him distracted. When he was under the influence, his insecurities were clouded. The confidence he had been missing had started to seep back in. However, alcohol couldn't keep all of his melancholy thoughts subdued. His usual dramatics were still fighting their way out. It wasn't enough to stop him from flirting with a random man's wife, though. And when he finally returned home, he ignored everyone and went straight to sleep. Alice was fighting through her own dilemma. Ever since the loss of Charles, she had been having intense visions of him. He held her every night and reminded her how strong she truly was. She accepted that she was strong enough to keep going without him, and that chapter of her story was over. She would go into the 20s with fond memories of her husband, but with the drive and focus of a woman who would independently raise her beautiful and large blended family. Josiah heard his mother's crying and entered the room. He didn't ask questions and immediately embraced her. Alice could see that even though Charles was gone, his legacy would live on in the goodness they instilled in their children.